if you're going to start to teach, the number one thing I would say is go with a heart of service. And I can't stress that enough. When you're thinking about how you can serve the community that you're teaching, it changes the way you prepare your lessons. It changes the way you explain things. And I mentioned this during my boot camp. My course today was like, I'm not going to stand up here to show you how smart I am. That's not even interesting to me. What's more interesting is if you feel smart or smarter than me because of how I've taught you. That's interesting because then you're enabled and empowered as a learner. If you go in with that attitude, you become like automatically like S-tier teacher, because a lot of teachers are just either, their motivations are different.
Hello and welcome to episode 12 of the Frontend Masters podcast. I'm Mark Kamansky, CEO of Frontend Masters, and today I sit down with Mark Techson from the Angular team at Google. Mark's passion for helping developers and the wider tech ecosystem is infectious, and he has an incredible story going from a developer in Chicago to a teacher at a boot camp, and then Harvard, and then eventually being hired at Google. He has an awesome story. It was super fun conversation with him, and I believe you'll very much enjoy this one. Well, welcome, Mark.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being on the podcast. So we're going to start with some warm-up questions. Are there any special skills that you have that people might not know about?
Ooh, I don't think people know that I can grab my pinky finger. And it's a very special skill.
Grab your pinky finger?
On my one hand, on the same hand, I can grab it.
On the same hand. So can we get a demonstration?
Yes, you can. You see, so I can do this. I can just grab it, and I can squeeze my fist just tight as I want. And I can this is a special skill. The streets don't know that I can do this, but this is a thing.
That's pretty wild.
Creep out kids with this thing, and I can hand it to them like, here, can you hold this? And then...
That's amazing. So in your course today, you were teaching on Angular, and we'll get into that. But you mentioned that you play guitar.
I do.
And you're into metal music and stuff like that. Could you talk about kind of history or maybe a fun story?
Yeah, so I'll tell you the funnest story of my whole guitar playing is how I started playing guitar. So when I was in college, when I was around like 18 or 19, I was in a rap group with a bunch of my friends, and we were trying to do whatever as rappers. And then one night, I literally had a dream that I was walking through the hills of Mexico with some really tight blue jeans on and like an A shirt, like an undershirt, and then a guitar strapped around my back. And I had never played an instrument, not once. I never even held a guitar. And then because of the type of person that I am, things like that, just I'm like, oh, I can do that. Yes, I can do that. And then I woke up and I started saving money, and I bought a guitar 2 weeks later, and I never stopped playing.
That is awesome. From a dream to reality.
From a dream. That's right.
That's awesome. All right, so what is something absurd you like doing?
Oh, this is easy. I like adding metal vocals to songs that do not have metal. They're not metal songs.
Can you give us like a taste?
I can. So let's say it feels like row, row, row your boat. I'd be like, row, row, row your boat. Like I would do that. I do that, and it's really absurd. It drives my wife crazy, but I do it.
It's awesome. Does your 6-year-old appreciate it?
He appreciates metal vocals, just not mine.
Okay. So you get to annoy your kid and your wife like in all-in-one shot.
It's all that I got. That's all I got left is annoying.
That's awesome. Honestly, so I can't remember who recommended you. Actually, I got some notes on that later. But I saw your Good Morning with Mark. Mm-hmm. And honestly, it was like some of these videos, I was like, I like this. This is great. Like a couple of them I retweeted and commented on. Where did that come from?
So that came from this place where I love supporting people and encouraging people. And I was trying to think what can I do that'll just help, right? Something that I can do to help. And so I was like, okay, I could try to do these really long videos, but nobody's going to watch that, right? The world has changed so much with TikTok and Instagram. So I started doing short form, motivational videos. And so that's where that came from, was just my desire to help people and serve other people. And I also thought this, I was like, you know what? Me, myself, I have all these mental blockers that come up, things that I want to do or things that are stopping me. And I'm like, I'm not the only person. There's no way I'm the only person who's struggling with this. So if I show people that I'm not like this robot perfect person that has this amazing career, perfect life, that they'll relate to that. And they'll say oh yeah, I'm not alone in this. And so I started making these videos.
That's awesome. I definitely felt that. They're really cool. Anybody listening to this should check it out. Yeah. So, like, what is your background? Where did you grow up?
Yeah, sure. So I grew up actually on the south side of Chicago, and I'm one of 7 kids. So I grew up in a really big family, and my mother was very like Mother Teresa-esque, where she would just like invite like kids from our family who maybe were having a hard time to like live with us. At one point, there was like 13 people
Wow.
like crammed into one house, but my mother just couldn't say no. And so I grew up in a really big, close family, and yeah, so Chicago, and then I just started living and learning about code at a young age, and that kind of like opened the door for everything that happened later on.
Yeah. And how did that end up happening? How did you get your first, kind of exposure to code?
Yeah. So I didn't even know what code was, but here's what happened. I begged my parents for a computer when I was a kid, and I still don't know how they managed to get me a computer, but they got me this like old IBM PS1 computer, and you couldn't really do anything on it, but it was enough where I could write basic code, like the language basic, right? And so, but I didn't know how to do it. So I would open up these blank files and I would type in like numbered like lines, like turn on computer, ask me which game I want to play, start the game, and then so I was describing what I wanted to happen, and I had no idea it was code or the idea of code, but that's how I started. And then when I was so lucky, so in my life, a few things have really just kind of worked in my favor to kind of just change my trajectory where I wouldn't have had the outcomes that I've had. I was so lucky that we happened to move into a neighborhood on the south side that had a computer science program at a public school in Chicago.
Wow.
I know, just completely lucked out.
That's amazing.
One of the teachers was an instructor at the Illinois Institute of Technology. So he was a college professor who also taught part-time in high schools. Just complete luck of the draw that I ended up at this high school. And they let me into the program. I almost got kicked out of the program because I wasn't doing my work. When I was in high school, I was kind of like, all over the place. I was trying to find my identity. So I was like, I knew I could have been like doing the right thing, but I was really more interested in like chasing girls, to be honest with you. And then I almost got an F in my first programming course. And this woman, Janice Gensler, if she ever sees this, I want her to know that this changed my life. She made me come after school every day to make up for that F, to switch my grade around. And I wrote, she would give me extra assignments. And I was like, oh, I hate this. I don't really hate this. I kind of like this. Oh, I'm kind of good at this. And then I changed my grade from an F to an A plus to the point where she's like, Mark, stop coming to my class. Like after school, because I was like, give me more. And she's like, stop coming to my class. Just take this book home. And it was a basic book. And then that old IBM PS1 that was super old and not really a lot of stuff on it, I could write basic code, and I just got started through that.
That is amazing.
Yeah,
That's
true
an
story.
Amazing story. So when you came back, were you writing games, or what were you doing?
That was the very first thing I tried to do, was write a game. But I didn't understand how to do a game loop. Now that I think back, I know what was blocking me, because I wrote a slot machine game that you could pull the lever and then it would do all the random things. So I didn't understand like the screen buffer concept and like the game loop as well as a teenager. So I would just overwrite what was on there, which you see the artifacts of the last screen, because I wasn't wiping the screen buffer, right?
Yeah.
I didn't know. I was just trying as a kid. So I tried with that, and then I didn't get into game development until college. And so we had these senior projects, and then I started doing game development for that, which was really amazing. Again, very lucky. One of my professors, at the year that I was in the class, he was like, hey, you have your senior project, and then you can do games. And I was like, oh yeah, I totally want to do a game. So I started like trying to make games that way.
That's awesome. So where did you go to school?
I went to undergrad at Lake Forest College. And then when I got to grad school, still in Chicago, again, very lucky, they had just launched a video game course. I'm telling you, a lot of things have worked in my favor. Just the timing has been just perfect. First time for a video game course. And it was using it's called Blitz Basic, which was based on Q Basic, but had 3D support. Right. And so then, because at that point in my life, Mark, I'm going to be honest with you, I was certain that I was going to finish graduate school and then move to Japan and make video games. But then I made the last couple of video games in grad school, and then I was like, no, that is not for me, because I couldn't take the kind of punishing schedule that you have to have if you're a game developer. And this one guy scared the heck out of me. I'm talking a lot, but I just finished the story. This one guy scared me. He came from Midway, like the game company that makes Mortal Kombat, like Warner Brothers Midway. And he was a guest speaker. And he looked so ragged. and his eyes were red, and he had these huge bags under his eyes, and he couldn't even really hang out and talk to us because they were in like crunch mode. You know what I mean? And I was like, I just don't want that life.
Yeah.
I didn't want it. So I was like, that's okay. I'll do games as a hobby maybe someday, but that was it.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. There's so much work that goes on behind the scenes on video games. And then, like, yeah, a lot of those game studios and stuff have reputations for, like, running people into the ground, trying to hit deadlines. I mean, games cost a lot of money. They take years and years to develop. It's pretty wild. So I like the whole, like, indie game movement that's been happening lately, where people, like, make something a lot smaller in scope and kind of release it on their own. But
Right.
yeah, I've been following Pirate Software. Have you seen his stuff?
Yo, that guy, his voice.
Yeah,
His voice is incredible.
absolutely.
I'm like, why aren't you just a voice actor like for a living? His voice sounds so good. I just found him recently.
Yeah. Same. Yeah. So, like, what type of development did you do, like, earlier in your career? Because you said you went to grad school, and then you're like, game development isn't necessarily for me. Like, what was your path after grad school?
Yeah, I did what I could. I was like, okay, I already know all this like Java programming, and I know some C and C++, and I know a bunch of game programming, but that's not going to be what I want to do. So I end up going down the path of just traditional enterprise. So I'm kind of like a hustle mindset of like, I got to have a job. Right. So I used to apply to I remember when I finished grad school, I would apply to any job that looked remotely close to something I could do. And so my first job was like this enterprise software company that made software for magazines, mail order magazines. So, to organize those pages, you get your InDesign file with all your assets, but how do you manage all the back end of that data? So that's the software that we wrote. And I hated that job. It was horrible job. But that was my first job. But I wrote Java code, and then I was a Java programmer for years.
And then, like, how did you end up? Because creeped on your LinkedIn profile. You were like, you got to teach at like a boot camp. Like, how did you go from like writing Java to like ending up there?
Yeah. So here's the pivotal moment. When I was writing Java at a healthcare org, like a huge healthcare org, right? And I was like, this is okay, but I really like front-end development. And so we got like jQuery and all this kind of stuff going on, prototype, Lodash, all that stuff. Then I see AngularJS. And I'm like, this is interesting. Like this, I think this is the future. And so I was like, I'm going to hedge my bets to say that I'm going to invest all of my time in learning how to do front-end development and web frameworks. So then once I did that opened up a new job at a different company, still a healthcare company, but they're like, oh, we're going to migrate to AngularJS. And so I started working on Angular full time. And then I got to American Express, started doing Angular. And then from there, that's where the like teaching opportunities came up, because transparently, we had some unexpected medical bills that were going to be like super expensive for us and my family, my wife and I. And then I was like, I need a second job. Like, because we just can't go into debt over this, I need a second job. So I started looking for a second job. And I was going to do some like fractional work for like, as a tech lead for maybe some startups. And I had a call with one of those companies the same day that Northwestern reached out to me and was like, hey, we're starting up this idea of this coding boot camp. Would you be interested? And it was the same day. I remember I was in a parking lot of Chipotle to go meet with this startup. And I was on this call with Northwestern to talk about like their coding boot camp structure. And that was a decision that changed my life, to be honest with you, to go teach a coding boot camp. That changed everything. And that opened up so many doors, because then I got to be in front of people, serving people who just like never had the opportunity to find out that they were good at computer science. You know what I mean? Because that's mostly career changers in boot camps.
Yeah.
And I would meet people who were just brilliant. I'm like, man, why didn't you do this from the beginning? Like, you would have been, 10 years in at this point, but not everybody knew they could even do it. And that was so fulfilling. Like I said, and that just opened up the door for everything.
That's awesome. Yeah, there's a lot of people that like their brain is wired for coding, but for whatever reason didn't get the opportunity. It's like boot camps. That was the good side of boot camps. Obviously, there was like a bad side, right? There was a lot of like, there was like almost too many boot camps, and it almost became like predatory at some point, right? But I think the good aspects and the ones that still survive through all that are like legit, and it's a legit path, and it's important.
I think if I could go back, I would probably. So if I went back to, okay, you're out of high school and you don't know what to do next. Do I want to go to college? Do I want to do a boot camp? I think the investment is so low in terms of time for a boot camp that I probably would have tried a boot camp back then and then maybe gone back to do like a bachelor's degree later if I knew then what I know now. Because I feel like what you get out of a boot camp is a lot of practical knowledge. And those like boot camp students, they come out and they can do stuff immediately. Like they know how to use Git, they know how to deploy, they know how to use like servers and all this kind of stuff. Harder for college students because they learn data science and algorithms and data structures and maybe some more theory stuff, but they don't like I didn't know Git or CVS when I came out of or Subversion when I came out of undergrad. I had never even heard of version control until my first job, right? Which was years later. So, but boot campers, like shout out to boot campers because they have to drink from the fire hose, and a lot of those people who come out, they can do some good stuff.
Yeah, and with that, like, what's your advice to people who are thinking about changing careers or going to a boot camp, like that early, 6 months or whatever?
Yeah. I say, so if you're thinking about it, before you sign up, I would say go and try out some self-study courses before you pay for a boot camp, right? So like, not to kind of like hype you all up, but like take some of your courses. Yeah. See if you even like it.
We have a frontendmasters.com/bootcamp is 2 weeks free of material. And then we also have, if you just Google like trial or whatever, it's like 5 free courses, getting a developer job, intro to web dev, intro to CSS, intro to JavaScript, all that stuff is free. Like the stuff before you get a job, we have a bunch of courses that are all free. And then our paid service kind of kicks in after you get through all the basics, right?
But I think that it's even worth it, to do that, to even do the paid stuff before you commit to the boot camp. Like, so think about this: if a boot camp is $10,000, how much value can I get for a fraction of that out of something like Frontend Masters?
Yeah, a lot.
That's what I'm saying. You get a lot of value. Yeah. So I would say do that now. See if you even like it because you might hate it. True. And that's the thing. Like you don't have to love coding to the point where you're like, oh, I live for code. When I say you might hate it, meaning you might be miserable. Problem solving like this may not be the thing that you want to do. So try it out. Like try as many free resources as you can, then make the decision if you want to like commit to long term.
And then from the boot camp, you continue down that like teaching path, right? So, like, where'd you go after that?
Yeah, so I taught at Northwestern for a while. Then I got a chance to teach at Harvard. They had a coding boot camp. And then I started teaching at some other places, like I was teaching at UCLA for a little bit. And, I mean, just teaching, here's the magic of teaching. And I think you know this. You don't know something the way you know it when you have to explain it to somebody who's never heard of it. And if your goal is to actually get them to understand it, it makes you a better engineer. Like I became so much better at problem solving because I started to think about problems from like, okay, what is the minimum thing that I can do here versus the overcomplicated solution that I would normally think of. So what's the smallest part that I can do? Because that's what I would tell my students. Before you get stuck, like what's the smallest thing you can do? And that gets you unstuck and you get to move forward. I'm like, oh man, I just started doing better at work. And then the hard part for me was that I didn't want to, like, after talking on, like, in front of the class and then getting on some, like, meetup spaces, I didn't want to stay in, like, the heads down coding space. I feel like it wasn't a good use of all of my gifts and talents. And so that was another pivotal moment for me was figuring out, like, oh, wait, I don't want to do this in this format. Like, I still love to code, but I don't want to be, like, in a cubicle in the back of an office for 60 hours a week or 50 hours a week coding only. I want to do something more with both sides of my personality because I felt really unfulfilled.
I see. And what would you give like as advice to people who are thinking about teaching or like diving in, kind of like those early stages of you deciding to teach at a boot camp, what would your advice be?
If you're going to start to teach, the number one thing I would say is go with the heart of service. And I can't stress that enough. When you're thinking about how you can serve the community that you're teaching, it changes the way you prepare your lessons. It changes the way you explain things. And I mentioned this during my boot camp. My course today was like, I'm not going to stand up here to show you how smart I am. That's not even interesting to me. What's more interesting is if you feel smart or smarter than me because of how I've taught you. That's interesting because then you're enabled and empowered as a learner. If you go in with that attitude, you become like automatically like S-tier teacher because a lot of teachers are just either Yeah, their motivations are different. I don't want to down people. I would say this. Their motivations are different, but it also is a reflection in the way they teach. You know, like what do their student outcomes look like? I mean, because if you want your students to be able to do something, then you got to change the way that you've prepared your lesson. That way they walk away with like tangible things that they can do.
Yeah, and okay, so I remember like David East was the first one that recommended you, and so I was like, okay. And I think, I don't know if he actually kicked off the intro or whatever, but then I was having dinner with Angie Jones, which she taught an amazing Java course for us. And I was like, yeah, I need to get a hold of this Mark Techson guy. She's like, he's awesome. You know, I'll send you over. So like, why are people so excited about you? You know, what would you credit that to? Because like, you know, it's strong referrals to you. That's a big thing, right?
Yeah. So I tell people this story because so when I first started Twitter, or X now, whatever, like I didn't have any followers or anything like that. And the way that I built a lot of my reputation was through support of other people. Like I didn't ask for anything. So I had people who were like significant, like following me, and I had like 1,000 followers. I had people like Angie Jones follow me, Sarah Drasner following me. You know what I mean? Like Emily Freeman, Emily Freeman following me. Like all these like amazing tech people were like supporting me because my position was to support other people. So when I saw people doing good work, it's like I did a very intentional, sincere thing. Like I would comment on people's work, amplify people's work, but from a sincere point of view. And people liked that because it was different than what others were doing. Because I never asked for anything. I never asked Angie to do anything for me besides like, I ain't never asked to be my friend. We just became friends over time. But I never asked for anything from her. And the way me and Angie got connected was, you know, I was like supporting her, like anyway, like when she do work, right? And I'd be like, oh, this is awesome. This is why this thing is awesome. Or here's something really cool that she did. Or here's something cool that Johnny Jones did. Or here's something cool the other person did. And then I would talk about my work that I was doing with Flutter. And she asked me about mobile apps one day. And that's what kicked off our like whole like friendship. She asked me a question and I just answered in depth. Right? Like I answered in depth and I will follow up with her like, hey, how's this going? How can I be supportive to you as you're trying to do this thing? Because in my mind, if we all win, that's really interesting. And what's even more interesting is imagine how good it all could be if we all took care of each other.
Absolutely.
Like just imagine, and I know that sounds like very high level, like, oh, abstract, foo-foo, woo, whatever. I'm just saying, if we all took care of each other, imagine how good it all could be. So my like method of like operation is I'm gonna take care of the people around me as much as I can. And if I do that enough, it'll help them to see, oh, let me take care of my circle. And then they'll take care of their circles and we'll just be better off. It won't be perfect, but we'll be better. And I think that's interesting.
Absolutely. I think that's good advice to anyone who's wanting to build a network. Let's say you don't really have much of a network on Twitter or whatever. Maybe you're from like a small town or something like that. There's not a lot of opportunity to connect. Like go out there and find somebody. It's like if you have some knowledge to give or help or whatever advice, if somebody's asking, like comment something good, right? Because so many, like especially as you get, when you put an opinion out there, there's a lot of people that are right there to like correct or whatever, like tear you down or whatever. It's just like the more people that are, you know, the more people and attention you attract, like you attract not all positive attention.
That's correct.
So when people are positive, they are supportive, they're helpful. It seems like, especially in this environment, it really sticks out. It absolutely does. And so, yeah, I 1,000% agree with you.
And just think about like supporting people in general. Like, so as a person like yourself with the audience and influence, like people probably assume you're doing just great because you have everything. And then it's like, but maybe you need that push of like, man, Mark, I hope your day is going great. Oh, this is really great what you did, man. I love what you folks are doing here. You know what I mean? Having that encouragement, you never know what that person is going through, right? And so being just a positive impact on people is just really something that is underrated, is being a positive impact, even toward people who you may think don't have anything negative going on. Like having people support me. Like I have some people on Twitter who will like message me or DM me and just be like, hey man, just thinking about you. Hope you're okay. Checking in. How's your head? How's your heart? Right. And I'm just like, man, I needed that because I'm under immense pressure for XYZ reason or something outside of like the social media world is going on. So having people care about you just goes far.
Yeah. And I think, like, I do feel fortunate that we're in education where it's like every day is kind of like a win in the sense of the more people learning, the more opportunities they have. And so we end up getting a ton of positivity around like Front End Masters brand and everything. I think our community is like really supportive of each other. And I think that in a lot of ways that's intentional, right? Because like if you think about your network, I'm sure you've attracted a lot of like people who are positive and supportive around you. And that positivity brings other people in. Like even if it's not the giant following that someone who has like a divisive opinions every other day, that's going to attract more people because it's like, who doesn't like gossip or whatever? It's like, but it's like, would you rather have a smaller audience that is positive and supportive, or are you just going for numbers? And there are people playing different kinds of games out there, and that might work for somebody else. But I think you and I obviously resonating on this point of like building a positive network is yields a lot more bang for your buck, I guess. I'd say like rather than worrying about the total number of followers or whatever, it's like I'd rather have a supportive and positive community. Anyways,
no, I think you're right. I think the hard part is I'll be super transparent about this. The hard part is when you feel like, oh, if I had more community, I could have bigger, more positive impact, right?
Yeah.
And then you see people who maybe have larger impacts. I'm talking about myself.
Yeah.
Seeing others who have larger communities, but for different reasons. And I'm just like, you know what?
Yeah.
Stick to the plan. You are building a particular community. Like I'm not just going for fame.
Yeah.
I'm going for positive impact because the thing that I like to do, one thing I like to do every year is I do different campaigns called Let's Be the Helpers. Because when I was younger, growing up poor, I always wish somebody would come and help. I always felt that way. Like, man, I wish somebody could help us. And nobody came, right? And so now I think about it from like, when I get the opportunity to be what I call like a micro philanthropist, I try to take those opportunities and I try to engage other people who are like-minded. Like we can change this classroom, right? This teacher is like maybe in an area where they have low resources. And instead of this teacher having to like pay out of their own paycheck, like us rich tech nerds, like let's just buy all the supplies. Let's just buy all the supplies. Right. And if we could do that, imagine the impact that's going to have on those students who now will have a equitable opportunity. Right. And yeah, there are other systems that are supposed to like solve for this. Yeah. We can't do anything about that stuff. I can't get more funding. I can't get more fair funding, but I can do what I can do. That's why I call it micro philanthropy, because it's like at a small scale to somebody's world, we're going to change it. We're about to blow this thing up and have a good old time with these people.
Yeah. I do think about the small impact, like even just you run into somebody in the elevator, and if you're like say something nice or smile or something, you can really impact that person's day. So that's kind of, I guess, your micro philanthropy. I like that.
Yeah,
I might use that. I'll have
use
to
it.
That.
Use it
For sure. So how'd you end up at Google?
Oh, that's a wild story, and I'll tell the short version of it. But I'll say this: I avoided Google for a long time because I knew what it was going to take to get in. And so I had got calls, they're just like, hey, well, you want to interview? Not calls like, come in. That wasn't like that. I got calls, do you want to interview? And I'm like, no, bro, because I already graduated from grad school. I'm not about to study again. Like I left that behind. And then what happened was when I started working on a startup that I had, it was a fitness app. And I was like, oh, I'm going to change the fitness community. And I started the startup. And then nobody joined it. I never made any money, but it gave me incredible experience because I was using this thing called Flutter, which is a mobile app framework, right? And I was using Flutter. And I got some of Google's attention because the Flutter was like a nascent technology at the time. You see what I'm saying? So I was building with it, being very public, being positive. Be positive. Okay, I was being positive and engaging with the engineers instead of talking crap about the tool. I was like, hey, here's what I love about it, but here's things I think we could benefit. Being constructively, like constructive criticism, but also very positive. Anyway, they started featuring me in their keynotes. So they would send out these community like call for video content, like for testimonials and stuff, right? So I would take that as an opportunity, like, okay, here's my chance to like hype up my app. You know what I mean? So I would come up with these creative clips, and then I would be in like the keynotes. And I'm like, bro, like this is wild. And then I got invited to Google I/O, and I sat down with some of the like Flutter engineers, some of the Dart engineers, and one guy walked up to me and he was like, you could do this if you really wanted to. And I was like, don't play with me, bro. Like, don't joke around. Like, don't get my hopes up high, because if I don't get it, I'm going to be disappointed if I try, because I know what it's going to take. He's like, you can do this. And I said, okay, all right, I'll try it. So then when the next time came around for an opportunity, I jumped in and said, yes, I will interview. And then that became like the most daunting experience prepping for an interview that I had, because I studied for 2 hours a night for 3 months. And that's why I said it's going to cost me, because I knew that I had to catch up on some things I'd forgotten about, and I just had to practice. Like I had to practice the interviews, I had to practice the problems, and that's a whole like lifestyle to prep for like a FANG interview. Mm-hmm. It's just a whole lifestyle dedicated to it. And I remember thinking to myself throughout the entire process, no matter what happens, I made it this far. So when I got to the phone screen, I'm like, hey, at least I got a phone screen. When I got past the phone screen, I was like, I can't believe it. So many developers don't even get past the phone screen. So if I stop here, fine. Got past the phone screen, then I got past a fit call. It's like, they think I can fit here. Then I had another call, and it was another interview. I was like, I passed that. I'm like, wait, I only went into this thinking if I can get information to try again next year. That was the whole goal. I talked to my wife about it. I'm like, I'm going to practice this year. I'm not going to get it. Don't worry about it. It's just to learn. Long story short, I get to the final day of the interview, and I remember like I had been practicing for 3 months, like nonstop. 5.5 hour interview, first round presentation round. So I'm like, oh yeah, let's go. I'm going to be on stage. It was like being on stage. I'm like, piece of cake. Get up there, crush it. First of the technical interviews, I was a little like worried because they told me I was slow at first. Like I could solve the problem, but it took me too long. So I started practicing with speed, all this stuff. Anyway, first interview, good. Second interview, good. Third interview, I do not know the answer. And then everything like in those movies where you see the person, like they're sitting in the chair, then they zoom all out and they're just like in a void staring around because they're lost. That's how I felt, because I'm like, I can't see the answer. And the interviewer was trying to help me and I just couldn't see it. I'm just like, you're blowing it. Then I get out the interview, and then I go to my wife, and I got tears in my eyes, and I'm just like, I blew it. And then she's like, relax, take a deep breath. You work too hard to prepare for this. You get back in there, and you do your best. And I still get a little choked up because I remember that moment pretty like fondly. It's a special moment for me and my wife at that time. And then I got back in there, and then I just was like, all right, this is what it feels like to get. And I said this in my interview. I said, I didn't solve the last problem. And I was like, this is what it feels like to be a boxer and you get knocked down and they say, get up and fight. And I'm like, how do you fight when you already got knocked down? That fear of failing again is right in the forefront of your mind. And I'm like, so how are you supposed to go? I'm like, oh, it's the mental endurance that people never talk about when prepping for like a long all-day interview. They never talk about that. They only talk about the coding challenges. They never talk about the endurance you have to have. And so, yeah, somehow they were like, all right, he's good. Bring him in. And then I got the job, and I was like, that's awesome. I did it. I can't believe I did this. I never thought that I was going to get in, and then I got in.
That's awesome. And how long ago was that?
I started in June of 2020, so 3.5 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
Been there for quite a while then.
Yes. I can't believe it. Still can't believe it. I kept thinking I was going to get found out someday, right? They're going to like, he snuck in here, that guy. But yeah.
Yeah, imposter syndrome never really goes away.
Nah, not in a place like that.
Yeah, for sure. And did you transition then from Flutter to Angular?
Yep. Okay. So I went in for the Flutter job, and I was like, I was working in Flutter. And what happened was the headcount changed, and they were like, well, we only have 3 roles open. 2 of the roles I didn't really have familiarity with, but remember that moment when I bet on Angular early in my career.
Yeah.
I was like, here's an opportunity again for me to use Angular to get to the next level. Again, Angular here's for me again. Can't believe it, but here it is. And so that's what I ended up doing.
That's awesome. So you've been on for that 3.5 years. You've been on the Angular team. Okay, cool.
On the Angular team, that's right.
Yeah, and then maybe just give a brief pitch for what's going on in the Angular world.
Oh, this is the best time in history to be an Angular developer. Maybe day one when we first announced Angular was the best time. There hasn't been a better time since. This is the best time. Modern features, we've learned a lot. The platform is so mature, and we're still improving it. So you get all that value. It's not like a startup like framework. It's like, no, we've been around. We've learned lessons. This is an amazing time to try Angular because we've just improved a lot of the things, a lot of the pain points we've improved. And I think that we got to show that. Like even in the course today, like we got to show how much more ergonomic things are, how much of a better developer experience things are, and how the learning journey has changed. So this is a good time. Do it. Jump into Angular right now.
And where did they go?
Go to angular.dev.
All right.
They can learn in the browser. First time we've ever been able to do this. Full tutorials in the browser. You can code in the browser. You don't need to install anything. Just get in there and have a good time.
Awesome. All right. So looking forward, do you have anything on your horizon, either career or personal, that you're super excited about?
Yeah, so let's talk about career thing. I think what's really interesting about my career is that I have been able to do something that I didn't even know this was my lane, right? As a developer relations engineer. And so now I'm thinking about how we can continue to serve the Angular community, and I can do it in a different way now that I've been on the team for a while, now that I've understood the needs of the community, I'm understanding the framework so much better. I'm so excited about where Angular is going to be going, right? And I think I'm excited to be there with it and to be there to help people know about what's happening. Personal, I'm really excited about developing the Good Morning with Mark just like series and kind of the framework that I've been thinking about around it. Not a web framework, but like just a framework of thinking, like how do I do things to be able to accomplish goals in my 40s with a family and, still being an overachiever who's now, older. Like that's a whole different process to like doing things. So now I'm thinking about how can I have fleshed out that framework and share with other people? So lots of stuff like that coming up. And 2024 and beyond. I'm not limiting myself to say, in 6 months I'm going to do this. It'll be ready when it's ready, but I want to be sharing that stuff and developing it.
That's awesome. I'll be following along with that for sure. And then, like any crazy like bucket list type things
that I want to do or have done.
I don't know. I mean, it could be either.
Yeah. I think for me, one of the coolest things about this year, let's just say that was on my bucket list. I got to Europe twice. I got to go to Amsterdam. I got to go to Berlin. I had been in London, 6 months before that. And it's just like my career has given me opportunities that young Mark, growing up the way that I grew up, never thought was a possibility. So my bucket list has been getting ticked off a lot lately, just like taking things off the list. Like I get to do that. I think for me in the future, I can't even think of what the bucket list is. Probably more travel, just more and more travel. I think that'd be great. Oh, I know one bucket list thing. I have to nail the solo for Open Your Eyes by Alter Bridge. That is on my bucket list. That solo is beautiful. That song is beautiful. It brings tears to my eyes. It reminds me so much of of some important moments that happened to me. I had to be able to play that solo. But Mark Tremonti, who is a guitar player for Alter Bridge, is a virtuoso, and I am a reguloso, right? I'm just regular. And so it's going to take some time, but I believe I can do anything. If it can be taught, I can learn it.
When you do learn it, where would you post it?
Oh, I'm posting it everywhere. When I get it, it's going on YouTube, it's going on Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter. I'm going to try to get Google to put it on their official website.
All right.
Like, when I learn it, it's going to be there.
Yeah, under Mark Techson, right?
That's right. That's right.
Or yeah, your name is Mark Thompson.
That's right.
And where did Mark Techson come from?
My wife is smarter than me. That's where that came from, because we were trying to figure out my Twitter handle when I decided to take social media seriously. And she was like, I don't know. And I was like, yeah, I can't really think of anything. And then she's like, Mark Techson. And I was just like, wow, you're so much smarter than me. It's such a good idea. And it's so like SEO like friendly, where if you type in Mark Techson, I am literally the only person that comes up there. You can't miss me. So yeah, she's good.
Yeah, that's smart. Last thing is like,
sure.
when you look at your career, are there any kind of like overarching themes that you're like, this, like I keep doing this and it seems to work for me?
I keep being the person that people like to work with, and that continues to work for me because that has opened doors like none other. So my skills as a developer are good. Like I am a good developer because you can't really have the career that I've had without having skills. But I am not the best developer in the world. Right there, I've worked with people who are much more talented than me, and I have no problems with that because the thing that I'm really good at is being the person that you want on your team, being reliable. So I keep being reliable, right? I keep being like supportive. I keep being the person you can count on. I keep being, just determined and hardworking. Like those kind of 4 skills just continue to happen and continue to open doors for me because I'll tell you with the whole Google interview, I did not know a lot of the things that I had to learn for the interview. I had forgotten so much of that stuff. I've been out of grad school for 10 or 15 years at that point. I don't remember that stuff. But determination. I was just like, if I can be taught, I can learn it. And I just keep having that. And that just continues to serve me as I go in with this heart of like, I want to be like a fantastic teammate because if we all do great, then, it's wonderful. Because think about it like this. The Angular team, whenever something goes bad, it's Angular the framework that gets blamed for it, right? And nobody looks at Mark like, oh, Mark is great, but the Angular team sucks. No, we're all together. So then we all have to win. And so that mindset on any team has been wildly successful for me. Like I want us all to win. I will help where help is needed. I will be the helper. Yeah.
That's awesome. We could end there, but I've got a personal question, right?
Sure.
Where does this mindset of like wanting to serve so much come from?
I mean, some of it came from like when in my 20s, I ended up having a more religious lifestyle for a while. And then the church that I was going to, they were all about service. It's like the primary directive. And for me, it just resonated, was like service first, right? Like serving other people. How can you be the helper? And then I guess in my mind, I was like, oh, what if we just took this outside of the like confines of the particular community and use it as a core directive, as like a lifestyle. And so then that just, over time, it just kind of became embedded in my mind of like, how can we serve? How can we serve? Who can we help? And sometimes it's hard because I want to help more and then I can't. And then sometimes I help probably more than I should and overextend myself. But it's energizing to me to help. Like it really is. Like even when I've been here, like I've been saying, okay, what can I do? What can I do to help? Like, what do you need from me? I will do whatever it is. Cause that to me is like being helpful and serving you folks to make sure that this goes off without a hitch, right? You need me to be here? I will be there. That's me serving, not complaining, not making this hard for you. I want to make it easy for you. And then guess what happens? We have this amazing experience like we did today.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for being on the podcast.
Thanks for having me. It's a blast.
Yeah, it's a great place to wrap. So, all right, cheers. Hey there, before you go, don't forget we're new at this. So any feedback, whether it's a like or subscribe, we'll take those, or a comment about what you didn't like or what you'd like to see more of in the future. We'll definitely incorporate that into the next episodes. I'm really enjoying these conversations. So any type of feedback would be fantastic, and especially sharing it with your friends and colleagues. So really appreciate it. Thanks for listening. See you in the next one.